Morning everyone. Today we're going to talk about reverse osmosis and really what's the right reverse osmosis for you, or do you need one yet? Now there are a lot of misconceptions on reverse osmosis. Does it change the flavor? Is it traditional? Is it real? And really all of those are kind of myths. It doesn't change the flavor. You're just removing the work and the water really out of the boil and sap. You're still doing the same process. You're still caramelizing sugars and removing water through evaporation. You're just saving a lot of time in the sugar house. So for hobby producers, there's a lot of, say, hesitation on reverse osmosis. Can I do it? Is it right for me? I don't know if I can afford it. All those types of things. So now, with the Leader H2O line, there's a lot of different options with the reverse osmosis. You could start with the Mini Micro. That's got two 20-inch membranes. For a backyard producer, this thing's great. Weighs 70 pounds. You can pick it up and carry it because these do have to stay heated. So you don't want them freezing. So you can carry this one inside. You don't have to have a heated space inside the sugar house. The Micro 2, it's got two 40-inch membranes. A little bit heavier, but like this morning I brought it down to the sugar house. I just put it on a dolly, wheeled it down, so you don't even have to keep this one in a heated space. You could wheel it into the garage if the garage is heated, and just set yourself up for that stuff. Or you can step up to the 600s, which is the next step, and that's what I have. Mine's just a little bit older. Well, first we're going to break down the Mini Micro. Mini Micro, it's about $2,000. So it's a kind of a heavy lift, but it's still affordable. And this one will do about 31 gallons of sap through it an hour. And that's going from about 2% sap up to just over 5%. Now you can add a recirculation pump. That's about another $300, and that will bring you up to just over 6%. What does that really equate to? That equates to time in the sugar house. So you get rid of the majority of the water, it's less time. They rate Mini Micro at somewhere around 250 taps as a max. It all depends on how long you want to run your machine. Even with mine, I'm on 1800 taps with a 600, but I just run it longer. Some days it runs shorter, some days it runs longer, so it's just kind of that balance and act of what you can do. So this one pump, membranes go through, and you don't even need to add a wash kit, but you can. The wash kit just makes things easier, but you can really just move hoses to different tanks so that you don't have to have a complicated system. Very simple to operate. It's just an on-off switch. Once you turn it on, you just have to hold the start button. These things have a pressure sensor in them so that once the pressure is built, you can let go of that. But if it loses sap coming in, it automatically shuts the unit off so you don't damage the pump. Once it's up and running, you just control one valve on your concentrate line and you adjust how much concentrate you want coming out a minute. And that's going to be based off your pressure as well as how hard you want to work your machine. This machine will pay for itself the first year in your time and your firewood, because time in the driveway, time in the sugar house, that takes a lot out of you. And then your firewood consumption, you're going to have to do about half the amount of firewood at least if you go to one of these machines. Now remember, sap is full of minerals, and those minerals get packed into the membranes. So the harder you push this, the higher pressure you run, the harder it's going to be to clean later. So I run mine a little bit easier, and I just run it longer. That way I don't beat on my membrane as hard. Mini Micro is 110 volt, so you can run it off an extension cord if you needed to, and it only draws just over 8 amps. So it's real economical on power. You don't need any big power with that. Great starter RO right here, and this thing will hold its value. People are going to be looking for these. Once you decide that the Mini Micro is it's too small for you, or you've already outgrown yours, the Micro 2 is your next step. Micro 2 is two 40-inch, 4-inch membranes that are on the back. Two pumps, so you've got an intake pump, your pre-filter, and then your high-pressure pump. And then with this, you're going to control your pressure off of just a ball valve up here on your pressure gauge. This one, too, has the pressure switch, so once it's up and running, you flip your pressure switch on. That way, when you run out of sap, it shuts off. To fire it up the next time, you just have to shut that switch off. So you control it. Now, with these, you're going to control based on this flow meter and your pressure gauge with this ball valve. So this will go up as you close it. 220 volts, about 10 amps is what this needs. So you need 220 power for this one. Still portable, run it on a dolly. There is a wheel kit for it too. I'd probably just go with a dolly because the wheel kits, they're not very big wheels for like going across the yard, that type of thing. About $4,000 for this one. Does have a wash kit that you can add to it. It's about $500. That hangs off the side, makes things a lot easier. Everything's compact. You just turn valves to run your wash cycles. It'll just make your life easier rather than doing your own plumbing. You'll have about the same amount into doing your own plumbing. You could build a closet inside your sugar house for this one. It just make it easier so you don't have to move it around. And these closets don't have to be big, just enough to get it inside. Micro 2, they say, is kind of around the 250 gallon range for an hour. You can go from about 2% to 8% with this. I would probably lean a little bit lower on that, say 2% to 6% is kind of an easier number. Don't beat on it as hard, just run it longer. Because if you run it down, you're gonna be getting maybe a half a gallon a minute of performance out of this if you're trying to get to that 8%. To me, I'd probably run it lighter and just run it longer. It just makes life a little bit easier, and again, you're not beating on your membranes as hard. This unit is a great unit, still holds its value for producers that have, say, 200 taps to 500 taps. This is a great unit. It's just how long you're gonna run it. Both of these units have the same pre-filter on here, just a spin-on cartridge, easy to get to. They're just in different spots, but they run the same one. So if you switch from the Mini Micro and you go to the Micro 2, same pre-filters. Reverse osmosis machines are really the workhorse of your operation, and a lot of people say this is the best investment they've ever made because these machines can work while you're doing other things. You can haul your sap, fire them up, get them running, and you can go collect more sap. You can go check for leaks. You can be bottling syrup. You can be going to get the kids at daycare like I do. All those things can be done while this is working, whereas you can't run the evaporator when you're not there. Things get funner when you run the evaporator with no one watching it. So having these can be your workhorse, and really these are the best money you can spend. I've always said that, you know, my filter press is the best, but that's because we bottle on a lot of glass, but really I couldn't make as much syrup as we do without the reverse osmosis. After you've outgrown Micro 2, your next step is really a 600. You can add a third post to these, but your pumps can only handle so much flow, so you're not gonna gain as much as you're investing in it. This thing will hold its value. Then you can step up to the 600s. 600s have one 8-inch round membrane that's 40 inches tall, and that's gonna do about 600 gallons an hour. Now, with that 600, that's rated at 50-degree water. So it's really, you put sap in it, it's colder, you kind of don't get the same flow. On a new membrane, you can be pretty close, but as your membrane gets a little bit older, you won't get that same flow. So with the H2O line of reverse osmosis, you can start with the 600 series. A new H2O 600 with a single membrane starts at about $16,000. The one thing with the 600 unit is if you're gonna add more posts down the road, I'd suggest a 1200. The 600, as you add posts with that 5-horse feed pump, it can't handle the flows. So with the 8-inch machines, they're saying about 550. So we call them a 600, but it's really about 550 gallons that'll go through it. On the 600, when you add that second post, you only go to 850 gallons a minute through it. So you're getting a gain, but it's not really doubling it. Now, you go to the 1200, you're gonna still start with that 550 for the single post, but you're gonna go to 950 for your second post. So you gain 100 gallons a minute just by upgrading to that 1200 unit over the 600. And that's because of the 7.5 horse high pressure pump rather than the 5. Then as you really go down the line is when you really see it. You add the third post, then you go to the 1200 on the 1200 unit. So there's jumps to be made, but for a $2,000 upgrade when you initially buy the base unit, you're going to see dividends down the road. So think about that when you're buying an 8-inch post unit. The 1200 is about $18,000 to start. If you're just going to go with a single post, you don't really ever plan on adding a post, then that 600 is a great option. If you're looking down the road of, I'm going to be adding more taps, jump to the 1200 right away, because that's going to keep your flows up. Now, if you're another one that goes, I keep my RO 8 years or so, maybe less, and then I replace it, you're going to have more replacement value or resale value with that 1200, because a lot of people are looking for ROs that they can add posts to, and when you add that post, it'll keep your flow rates up, so it's got more resale. For a couple $1,000s extra in the beginning, it's going to pay dividends down the road. Going to a bigger unit, you're going to want a heated space because you're not going to want to lug these things around. I've got mine in the heated closet. It's probably about 4x4-ish, somewhere in that neighborhood. All my plumbing's inside, so all my valves stay heated, and I just use a little ceramic heater. Your ceramic heaters, you're going to want to have them on the floor though. Mine's in the back, because what's going to happen is you need that fan to kick on and circulate the air. When I first put it in, I had it up on the shelf up top, and I had an indoor-outdoor thermometer with a probe on the bottom and the thermometer up top. I had 32 degrees on the floor and 58 on the ceiling because it wouldn't run long enough to get that air circulating. It worked, I caught it, just moved it on the floor, and that's where it stays now. On my unit, I base not necessarily on membrane pressure, I base mine on flow. So I generally run mine about 4 gallons a minute of concentrate coming out, and that's what I run. So early in the run, probably about 250 psi. Later in the evening, as things are changing, the membrane's getting fouled up a little bit, it'll be closer to 300 psi. But I run it more so at that on gallons a minute rather than even bricks coming out. By doing that, I just run it longer. I run it right back into the concentrate tank. I've got a 3-way valve on the back that allows me to just flip that valve, and I can put it up to the head tank, or I can put it back in the raw sap tank. That just makes it to where in the middle of it, we're getting down on head tank capacity, so I'll just throw some more up there. Okay, that's filling up. I'll throw it back and we'll just recirculate some more. So I generally start somewhere around 6 to 8% when we start boiling, and I finish some nights around 16%, or you can't read it on the hydrometer because it's that far out. That's how it works for me. There's a lot of people that will take and they'll be like, we boil 18% every day. We get to that number and that's what we boil. That works for them, this works for me, and it's just kind of where I'm at as far as tank capacities and number of tanks in here. Everyone knows my sugar house is pretty cluttered and it's pretty full, so that's kind of where those are. Now, all these units come with picture diagrams that show you what valves to have in what position, and that's because, well, it's just easier. It makes it to where you kind of can't mess it up. You don't have to read and remember what valve's what. I know for mine on the side here, I've got all my diagrams. I've got my concentrate cycle. It shows me what position the valves are supposed to be in. Rinse, soap wash, recirculation, all those are kind of just there. So I just, even today, I'll still go look at it, make sure they're right. By the end of the season, you kind of know what position everything's supposed to be in. But when you first start out, it's not bad. And then out here, I just run my concentrate percentage based on that, or pressure up here. The bigger units are going to require some pretty big power, anyway, 35 to 50 amps, depending on which one you go with at 220 power. So you're going to need at least 100 amps in a sugar house. That's what I have down here. I wish I had 200 in here, just because I'm walking the line of using all 200 at times between the reverse osmosis, the vacuum pump, and the blower for the evaporator. So pushing the power level here, if you're looking at building a really big sugar house, you're going to be looking at closer to the 400 amp range coming in. Cleaning reverse osmosis, not as hard as you think. Think about washing your hands. You've been working outside all day. You go inside, you wash your hands with cold water. It works okay. Then you add warm water, comes off better. Then you add some soap and your hands clean right up. Same thing with cleaning your membranes. Membranes kind of build up a bacterial layer from bacteria that's naturally in the sap, other things that are in there that build up in the membrane. So we're going to wash those out. Now, you run out of sap. Now it's time to start the cleaning process. But you got to remember, these membranes are full of sugar still, and we need to get that sugar out. So we're going to do what we call a desugar cycle. With your desugar, you're going to just swap your intake over to your permeate side. And you're going to run permeate through, and you're still in the concentrate cycle though. And you're going to start concentrating. And you're going to check with your sap hydrometer and keep checking until you're down to what you call a good number for how much sugar. I generally stop at about 2 to 3%, and that's just because to get to 0, you're going to run so much water through that it's really going to change your concentrate level, that it's just not worth it. And you're cut for that little bit of sugar that's left in there. It's not worth it to me. So we've desugared now. Now we're going to do our first rinse, and that doesn't have to be a lot, just a little bit more So say it took you 5 gallons to desugar, maybe another 5 is all I would do for a rinse cycle, and that's just to make sure we get the rest of it out. Then we go into our soap wash. On this machine, you're really only going to need about a teaspoon of soap, and you're going to pour that in, and you only need a couple gallons worth of wash water. With this one, I recommend preheating your water a little bit. Take a scoop of permeate and then put that in your wash bucket. That way you kind of get the water warmed up, because it'll just take a while to. Normally we use the friction of the pumps to create the heat in the water for that wash cycle. So you're going to kind of want to have a little bit of preheat just so you're not starting from cold sap. And you're going to let that run until you get up to temperature. Now you're going to run to about 110, 115 degrees for temperature. But we've got to rinse the machine too. So rinsing the machine is the biggest thing, because we need to rinse the chemical out. And everyone says, well, how much permeate or clean water do I need to rinse my machine afterwards? We recommend a gallon for every gallon of capacity. So on this one, it's about a 31 gallon an hour machine. You'd need about 30 gallons of permeate. More is always better. They used to say you could do it with half the capacity, so you could do it with about 15, but more is better. With this machine, you shouldn't have any trouble getting up to that level of permeate, because you should have enough sap. Run your permeate through for your rinse cycle, and away you go, and this thing's ready to be put away for the night. With this one, starting with the warm water for your soap wash is also a great idea. It gives your time that it's going to take a little bit of a boost, so you can cut your wash cycles down a little bit. But remember, the longer you are at the warmer temperatures, the better it's going to clean your membranes. Still the same wash cycle, rinse cycle, desugar cycle, it's just going to take a little bit more. pH paper is going to be your best friend. So you start your soap wash, let it run for a minute, tear off a piece of pH paper, dip it in your wash tank, make sure it's blue, that's all I do. If it's gone down, say it's back to yellow, you add a little bit more soap to it, and then let it go through the night. I check mine once or twice, I don't do it a lot, but as the bacteria pulls out of that membrane, your pH level will drop a little bit, so that's when you just add a little bit more soap. When you're doing your acid wash, same thing, you're going to want to be in the red. It's easy. End of the season care. What we're going to do is we're going to do a soap wash, just like we normally would, rinse it. Then we're going to do acid though, because we've been taking care of the bacteria and the gunk in our membranes and getting that out. Now we need to take care of the minerals that have been deposited in our membrane, and you have to do that with an acid. And all we're using is citric acid. Citric acid is the same thing that's on like sour candy. So it's food grade, but it is an acid. So with these, again, it doesn't take a lot, and you're going to do this with your pH paper. You're going to check it to make sure you're at the level you want to be at, but you're going to just put some citric acid in, kind of the same ratios that you're going to need, and you're going to run it through up to temperature. Then you're going to let it sit. Now, you can come down in a day or two, turn it back on, run it up to temperature, let it cool off. And you can do that for about a week. I do mine probably 5 days, and I run it up to temperature probably 3 times. Then I do a rinse, a soap wash, a rinse, and a soap wash. So you're going to do your soap wash 3 times. At the end of it, then you're going to put it away. Now, with these, off-season used to be a matter of putting preservative into them. Now it's gone to more of just do a rinse cycle every, say, month or so to rinse the water that's in your RO, and that'll keep it good to where you're not using a preservative in the off-season. I went to that a couple times. I went a little bit longer than I probably should have. But it's been, I don't know, probably just about the same as far as ease. I don't know. It's just a matter of remembering that you've got to get down here and get this thing rinsed every month or so. If you're looking at sizing your sugar house on tanks, size bigger with permeate than you think you're going to need. So really, I'm good for a single to a 2-post machine, because I've got about 900 gallons of permeate. So I'm walking that line that I can clean my machine with a 2-post based on that. But I upsized my permeate tank looking for potential down the road. If I had more space in here, it wouldn't be a big deal, but I'm maxed out on what I can get in here for tanks. This is a 10-foot tank, and that's an 8-foot tank, and all there is less than a 2-foot walkway between them. And then this tank, I'm right up against the wall for the RO. But so you kind of got to base your building on it, but going with a little bit bigger permeate tank is not a bad thing. If anyone has any questions about reverse osmosis units, don't be afraid to reach out. My email address is down in the description. You can find me. I'll answer your questions. These two are available. I do have a wash kit for this one in stock, so we can add that if you're looking for that. Next year, this one's available. I was supposed to get my new one. I pushed that back just because I wasn't quite ready. I got too many other projects going, and I got to replumb my room here. But this unit's going to be available in the spring if someone's looking to upgrade to a 600 unit. This is a great unit. I've never really pounded on it. Just it's time to upgrade for me. I need a little bit more horsepower looking down the road at some options of maybe adding taps. So this one, I've kind of reached my max with it. So I'm kind of looking for maybe a second post at some point. Like I said, anything I can do to help you guys make more syrup, make better syrup, don't be afraid to reach out, and I'll catch you in the next one. Now, once you go beyond the 600 or the 1200, you can really step up. They've got the Supras and the Hybrix concentrators for the bigger guys. Those things can hustle through some sap, so you can make a lot of syrup in a hurry. But for most people, the Mini Micro, the Micro 2, or the 600, 1200 units, those are kind of the sweet spot for a lot of producers.